Hi, Doug Goldstein here with the Goldstein on Geld Show. Today, we're talking about how to play nice with the IRS when you're transferring money overseas. In today's episode, I'd like to give you 9 points that you need to keep in mind when you live overseas or are dealing overseas and transferring money. A lot of times, what I find in my day job as a financial advisor, I work with people who live in Israel who have US investment accounts, and they're moving money all the time. But sometimes they make some mistakes, or sometimes they're just not aware of some of the issues that they have to know. Being an American who lives outside the United States, even if you are what we call an accidental American, meaning maybe you don't really even speak English, in which case you're probably not listening to this podcast. But let's say you're the parents and you've made your child an American citizen for whatever reason, and that kid doesn't really know much about dealing with America yet. Just like any American citizen, no matter where that American citizen lives, he has responsibilities and requirements to file to the IRS. So I'm going to go through some of these with you. At the end, I'm just going to mention, I'll just give you the punchline now, which is in many, many cases, it's much easier for people to leave assets in the United States when they live outside the United States, like in normal brokerage accounts or IRA accounts or bank accounts. This is what I do all the time with people. And of course, by doing that, you avoid a lot of these problems. But that being said, there are many reasons, and I myself am one of those people who put some of my money outside the United States. So you need to make sure that you're doing everything correctly. So number one, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of reporting all of your foreign financial accounts to the IRS. Now, hopefully you've heard of the FBAR, which is the Report of Foreign Bank Accounts, and maybe you've heard of FATCA, which is it stands for Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. It's actually sort of a joke. It's called FATCA, but it's meant to sound like fat cat, FATCA. If you just put the T at the end, fat cat. The idea, the reason they named this law that was because they were really hitting on Americans who were hiding money overseas, pretending or claiming that they're the fat cats who don't pay any tax. Really, the millions and millions of Americans who live overseas, I believe, are perfectly honest and filing all the returns that they're supposed to do, and hopefully they know about them. And they're not super rich, and they want to be left alone, and hopefully they can do their filings correctly. But if you do not do the filings correctly, the penalties are severe for willful violations. And meaning, now that you know about the importance of filing an FBAR, for example, I believe the penalty, forget the taxes, the penalty can be $100,000 or more, or 50% of the tax of the value of the portfolio that you didn't report to them. Meaning, let's say you have $500,000 in an Israeli bank and you don't mention it to the IRS. Just think of how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties you might have to pay as a result of that. If it is a non-willful, meaning it's just a mistake, they say that the penalties start at $10,000. These are huge penalties that people have for not filing. So absolutely, it's important that you listen to this whole episode. And if you're not sure that you are doing the right thing, you have to go speak to an American accountant who understands cross-border people. I'm not an accountant. I'm not giving you tax advice. What I'm doing is I'm sharing with you the things you need to bring up with your accountant to make sure that your accountant understands your situation. You know, there are a lot of clients that I work with people I've spoken to who say, no, my accountant's in America, same guy. In fact, he doesn't really even quite know I live overseas because I'm using the address of my brother in New York. Huge mistake, right? If you're living overseas, make sure your accountant knows that. Okay, number two, make sure you choose the right financial institutions to work with. You need respectable institutions. A lot of times when people move overseas, they like to Israel, they see a few of the big banks, which I think are respectable organizations, but there are a lot of other companies that are marketing to Americans who don't live in America. And all of a sudden, this should seem strange to you. When they tell you something that sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. You need to make sure that you're not being swept away by someone telling you, oh, well, now that you live in Israel, you don't need to file this, or we can set up a special insurance wrapper, and then you don't have any taxes in America. Really? Do you really think that the IRS decided, oh, we'll make an exception for Americans who live overseas and buy an insurance wrapper around their investment portfolio, that's based in the Isle of Man? Somehow, I don't think that's what the IRS is really thinking. If you are going to get involved in such complex tax structures, which I have to say, every time I've looked at them, I've been pretty unimpressed. You absolutely need a really straight tax attorney, a really straight tax accountant to help you with these deals. It just doesn't make sense. So you'll see a lot of these deals being offered to you, especially in Israel. People often like to invest in real estate, and there are groups that put together real estate deals that are maybe fine for an Israeli, but for an American Israeli, there are all sorts of problems. They could be what's called a PFIC, a passive foreign investment corporation, which means it's passive, that you're not involved in the day-to-day operations of it. It's foreign, meaning it's not American. It's an investment company. It's investing in real estate. So a PFIC has all sorts of really difficult tax consequences for Americans. In fact, most of the accountants I know tell their American clients, don't invest in PFICs, which, by the way, might also just be an offshore mutual fund, a mutual fund that if you go into a local Israeli bank and buy an index fund there or a mutual fund, that in and of itself could have terrible tax consequences to you because you're an American citizen. Make sure you work with a reputable financial institution that specializes in cross-border clients like you, because otherwise they may inadvertently put you into the wrong sort of investment. Okay, that was number 2. Number 3, transparency is the key. When you're dealing with the IRS, make sure that you are reporting everything. All your financial transactions should be perfectly clear. And if you're not sure, speak to a tax professional, speak to a company that can help you to move the money in a way to ensure that you are being fully compliant. Along those lines is number 4. In general, you don't want to use checks or traveler's checks, certainly, or unusual ways of moving money, because those are red flags. When you do something like this, the IRS says, gee, why isn't this guy just wiring money like everyone else on the planet? Everyone wires money. That's a normal way to do it. People using other forms of money, Bitcoin and traveler's checks, for example, or cash or gold, things that just aren't the normal way of doing things. This is a red flag. Now, whether you're an honest guy, and I'm presuming you are, because Goldstein on Gelt listeners usually are very, very honest, I like to think, it looks like money laundering or tax evasion. It looks like you're doing something wrong. And that opens up the ire of the IRS and gets them interested in your case. You never want to be someone interesting to the IRS. You want to be boring. How do you do it? Therefore, what's this? Wire money. Just go to your bank, wire the money. It's traceable. You can say, I had my money in the bank in America. Now it appears in my bank in Israel. Here's the path. Here's the signature I signed. Everything is normal. And along with that, then, is number 5. Document your transactions. Keep meticulous records of everything you do. If you're getting an inheritance, for example, well, keep a copy of the will. Keep a copy of the wire transfers. If there are letters with the lawyers or the executors or the trustees, keep copies of all of that. Keep them neat and easy to find, because one day you're going to have to show it to the IRS. If you have bank receipts or bank statements, any relevant documentation is something that you should be holding on to. Having a paper trail of what happens can prove the legitimacy of the transaction. And if you don't have a paper trail, the assumption always seems to be that you're doing something wrong. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people suffer from that, and it can take them a month to get their money moved or more. And now imagine if you don't have good records, passing this along to your children, who one day are going to get an inheritance from you. What a nightmare. Number 6, seek expert advice. If you're not sure about this, if I'm saying things and you're busy taking notes, and it sounds like too much, take it easy. Get in touch with me or someone else who's in the field who can advise you on the best practices for transferring money. You can speak to a tax attorney or to your accountant about the paperwork that you should be keeping. People who are professionals who deal with this literally every day. My office is all the time dealing with cross-border money transfers or inheritances or stock transfers. We're dealing with this on a regular basis. We know the right ways to do it, I think, and the wrong ways to do it, and the efficient ways to do it. We always focus on the efficient ways to do it. All right, number 7 could be a little more complicated, and it's why you need to stay in touch with an accountant, which is keep on top of any tax treaties, because there are benefits and disadvantages in the US-Israel tax treaty, for example. Like if you are earning Social Security and you live in Israel, did you know that you don't have to pay tax on that to America or to Israel? That's in the treaty. A lot of accountants in America don't know that. Why? Because they don't have clients in Israel. You need to speak to your accountant and keep every year, say, hey, is there anything new in the world of taxes that will affect what I'm doing or that will change my situation? Number 8, you want to also report that you want to report all income and assets accurately. Make sure that the information you have is accurate. Don't just guess. Believe me, I've actually seen people say, well, I'm going to put on my F bar. I think I had some money there. I'll just guess the amount of money. That's crazy. The tax liabilities, when they calculate taxes, they use a calculator. They don't use about. So you want to make sure that the information you have is up to date. That's why it's critical to keep your statements. And don't just say, oh, I can always log into my brokerage account and download the statements. Well, you can until, let's say, you transfer out of that account, or you're no longer with that brokerage firm, or they only keep 12 months worth of statements on file that are available to you. You should download your monthly and your yearly statements, at least keep them on your computer so that you'll have access to them. And finally, number 9, regularly review and update your financial strategy. Moving money, dealing with taxes, investing, they're all part and parcel of one big discussion, and they're all related. And there are penalties for making mistakes, and there are huge benefits for doing it right. So you want to be the kind of person, the kind of investor who's handling cross-border investing the right way. So again, in conclusion, moving money to Israel is a significant step that requires careful planning and doing it right and being in compliance with all the laws. Number 2, by avoiding the red flags that I mentioned earlier, like checks and traveler's checks, Bitcoin, any sort of unusual way, by avoiding those, the IRS is probably going to be less interested in you because they see you're doing everything kosher. And finally, stay proactive in the way that you keep an eye on your money, the way you keep an eye on your investments, the way you're viewing everything, and critically is the way you store all of your paperwork and all of the proof for everything that you've done. All right, this was a very technical Goldstein on Geld episode. In my day job at Profile Investments, we try to help people get set up as much as possible, as much as they're willing to do things the right way. But we always guide them to make sure that what they're doing is legal and kosher and efficient. And if you need help with any of that, feel free to get in touch with me. You can contact me at the website of goldsteinongelt.com. Thanks again. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the show and got something out of it. Please be sure to tell your friends. Give us a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to podcasts. And once again, I'm Doug Goldstein. Looking forward to seeing you next time here on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.